Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host, coming to you from South Plainfield, New Jersey. Yeah, this is it's, I guess, Halls, that's the name of the company, but it says it's Americold out front. Anyway, I have what could best be described as a refrigerated LTL load. I have 4 pallets in the trailer that I picked up over in Pennsylvania last night. And since I couldn't really be here till 7 or shortly before, I split my clock. I did 8 hours on the side of I-78. One of the nice things about New Jersey is, in addition to the fact that it's the Garden State and the home of Bon Jovi, they're from Sayreville, if you're keeping score at home, which actually isn't very far from here. Even though there's not a lot of great parking in Jersey, there's a lot of places like on the side of 287 and on 78 and maybe on 80, but I'm not as familiar with that, where there's just some extra dirt, gravel, whatever beside the shoulder, so you can pull over and get completely off the shoulder or have a really big space between you and the road. So I found a spot, I just ducked in there, and that's where I was for 8 hours. I thought I wouldn't be able to sleep because it was pretty loud, all sorts of cars and trucks going by, but it worked out okay. So a lot of stuff going on that's been on my mind, but today's May 17th, Friday, by the way, and today is the anniversary of the per curiam decision in Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka that was handed down in 1954. And that case was argued by future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. And just as an aside, Thurgood Marshall went to Howard University Law School. He wanted to go to the law school that I went to, which was University of Maryland. But University of Maryland School of Law back then was segregated, so they wouldn't let him in, which is really stupid in retrospect. It was unjust, at the time, but it was stupid in retrospect because there are a very, very tiny universe of law schools that have, that have ever had a justice of the Supreme Court as one of their alumni. And most of the time they're big, Ivy League schools like Harvard, Yale, Columbia, then also Stanford and stuff. So it would have been a huge coup to have somebody on the Supreme Court from the law school. But in recognition of their screw up way back when, they named the law library at the law school after Thurgood Marshall. And also, BWI Airport is actually named the Thurgood Marshall BWI Airport or whatever. So Maryland is working hard to recognize Justice Marshall. Anyway, the interesting thing about this case was that it reversed a case called Plessy versus Ferguson, which was handed down in 1893, where the Supreme Court said separate but equal is okay. And there was a lot of dynamics that had to line up, or a lot of things that had to line up for this case to be ruled the way it was. One of them was that the Chief Justice was a guy named Fred Vinson, and he died in 1953, just before the case was argued. And the court was then, and when we talk about a court, we would have called we would have called it the Vinson Court, but then it became the Warren Court, and Earl Warren was the Chief Justice, and it was a different court, and the decision was unanimous, and I called it per curiam before because the opinion in the case is written anonymously, so it's what we call per curiam. In other words, a decision of the body, and no one is credited with writing the majority decision. The interesting thing is that I got to admit that I've read this, and I've read that opinion, and I never thought it was particularly compelling. I mean, I don't disagree with the decision, but in reading it, my impression was, man, they really didn't do a lot of legwork. They were just like basically like, yeah, Plessy was wrong, so we're just overruling it. And there wasn't a lot of justification. Of course, Brown versus the Board of Education then opened up all sorts of other civil rights laws later on. And by the way, this only applied to public schools. So you could still discriminate on the basis of race in private schools. A decision later on made it so you couldn't discriminate in private schools based on race. You can, I think, there are other categories. Like if you had a all-girls school, you could discriminate on the basis of gender, for example. Anyway, but the crazy thing about it was, and I say crazy, people, states in the South, by and large, just ignored the law. And it took a lot more stuff going on, including, sending federal troops to schools, sending FBI agents, U.S. Marshals to schools to force desegregation. So anyway, but it was momentous. There is a National Historic site, National Park Service historical site in Topeka, Kansas, regarding the decision. Okay, so I'm here in South Plainfield, New Jersey, and I was bragging to somebody. Actually, I was bragging to some people yesterday that I had 2 pre-plans in my, if I looked on my phone in my app, I had 2 pre-plans. But I am not joking when I tell you that my driver manager put an additional 2 pre-plans on me before I got unloaded. So for a very short period of time, I had four pre-plans. And I don't think that's super abnormal at my company. I knew what I was doing all the way through Sunday, as early as Wednesday. I already knew what I was doing all the way through Sunday, but now I have pre-plans that take me out till Tuesday. And, the nice thing about it, I've always said, a pre-plan means you get it before you drop the load you're on. And the nice thing is that when you have all these pre-plans stacked up, you can not only know kind of which way to go when you leave a place, which makes you more efficient, but also you can really plan several days ahead. You can look at what you're recapping on your clock. You can plan your stops better. It just makes the driver's life easier. And it also just keeps you running. I mean, you know that you're going to take your 10-hour break or whatever, and then you're going to be back on the road. There's not, you're not sitting around. So I got an hour and 31 minutes in the sleeper berth right now, so I need to get to 2 hours to basically complete my my split And yeah, then I'll get back on the road. I got another load to pick up here in New Jersey. I say another, I didn't pick up here, but got a load to pick up here in New Jersey, and then I'm taking that to Alabama, and then I'm picking up in Alabama and going to Georgia. Then I'm picking up in Georgia and going to Kenosha, Wisconsin. So yeah, that'll keep me busy for the next little bit. I wanted to tell you know, after I did the last video about the driver facing cameras, you know, I had some comments where people said, hey, I'm reconsidering the trucking business or driving a truck altogether. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit because I feel like maybe people are getting too distraught, or maybe they're overreacting a little bit. And here's why I say that. The technology, you know, first of all, driver-facing cameras have been on the market for, you know, I think probably, you know, kind of in a commercial setting, meaning they were used by companies and company vehicles well over a decade. And because I can remember seeing videos like there's this video on YouTube. I thought it was kind of funny, in part because the guy I don't think he got hurt too bad, and he definitely was alive after the accident. But there's this dude that's driving like a company car, like a Ford, like Escort or something, right? And there's a driver facing camera, and he's not wearing his seatbelt, and he's like all drowsy and stuff. It's daylight, it's daytime though, but he falls asleep. It's on YouTube. He falls asleep, and then he runs off the road, and the car rolls. And this dude, who's a pretty big guy, he legit goes from the driver's seat to the passenger's seat to the seat behind the driver's seat to the other side of the car, and then you just hear him. He's like, oh, you know, like at the end of the video, like he's moaning from getting slammed all over the inside of that car like a carnival ride without a seatbelt. And so, you know, the cameras have been around for a long time, and I think that there are going to be companies that put the cameras into place. I think, you know, and not to focus on Prime, but I think what's going on at Prime is, you know, you got a guy that wants to try to make his mark. Like he thinks he's gonna, I don't know, I just don't know what his agenda is, but you know, it's pretty clear there is an agenda. We'll see what the follow-through looks like. Like I said, they didn't even follow through on the personal conveyance stuff. Like when I was there, never once, never did I have to ask somebody to use PC. I just used PC the way I always did what I wanted. Nobody said a word. So again, I don't know what the follow-through is going to look like with these cameras. But here's the thing. I think there's going to be a very stark division between companies that have them and companies that don't. And I think the companies that don't have them, like my current company, I think that's going to be a really significant recruiting tool, because there's probably nothing I can think of. I've been driving a truck, you know, been in the over-the-road world for 5 years, and I've been at several different companies, and I cannot think of anything that's as polarizing or just solicits the reaction of any, you know, of most drivers more than driver-facing cameras. Way more than how fast trucks go. Way more than does the company pay detention. Way more than how much the company pays per mile, or, you know, anything like that. driver-facing cameras are a big deal to people. And I think that that's going to hurt recruiting at companies that have them and where it's widely known. Like when I went to Schugel, I didn't know they had driver-facing cameras. And I didn't find out till I got an orientation. And I just kind of dealt with it. And I don't know that, and here's the funny thing too, is that no company, there were driver-facing cameras at Schugel that you could not opt out of. You couldn't cover them up or anything. At GP Transco, you could cover them up unless you had a safety incident. Then they made you uncover it. I uncovered mine because they also paid you extra. If you voluntarily did it and you didn't have a safety incident, they would pay you 2 cents a mile more. And I did a video one time where I calculated what that would be worth on an annual basis. So my message to people that have been like, oh, I think I'll get my CDL, I think I'll go into trucking, I don't think that it's, I just wouldn't overreact. I would just be like, yeah, let me find a company that doesn't have them. Or even let me find a company where I can get my CDL on the company's dime, do my time, and then, if they have the cameras, do my time, and then move on to some place that doesn't. And, recruiters are going to have to answer these questions. Recruiters, they fudge on a lot of stuff. They're like, oh, yeah, we run these lanes and our trucks go this fast or whatever. But there's no fudging on the inward-facing cameras. Either you have them or you don't. I did talk to one recruiter, and I will tell you the company. It was Grand Island Express, and I talked to them actually a while ago while I was still at Prime, and one of the here's the interesting thing about that conversation. The recruiter there was very nice, and she was very forthright. And she said, we have driver-facing cameras. And I had talked to one of their drivers, and he just happened to be the guy that had been there forever and was making like 72 cents a mile as a company driver. And I really didn't have an issue with the cameras, like I said before. My issue with them is that they had done away with personal conveyance. And they had, and the driver I talked to was like, yeah, they got this guy in that never drove a truck, and he's trying to like make his mark and stuff. And when she told me that they were getting ready to do away with personal conveyance, I was like, all right, that's a deal breaker, because I really don't like companies that tamper with personal conveyance because they're unwilling to just train people properly. Like, she was like, yeah, people were using it wrong. And I said, that's a training issue. The lazy way to do things is to just take it away from everybody instead of, just training people how to properly use it and holding individuals accountable. And I felt that way at Prime too. But anyway, I don't think the trucking industry is going to go... Well, let me back up. So some people have said, oh, this is just a precursor to a federal mandate. But here's the thing. If the cameras are as big of a deal as I think they are to drivers, I don't think that the federal government is going to really risk a driver revolt. And the reason is because there's too much at stake. The economy is way, way, way too dependent on trucking to have widespread trucker defections. And, people might be like, well, a lot of people aren't going to leave the industry because they can't, this is just what they do. And that may be true. But the other thing to consider is that unlike, for instance, the ELD mandate, the ELD mandate was just an extension of the idea that we already kept logs. It was just like, oh, well, people keep logs. We know they're cheating on them, right? We know people keep multiple sets of logs. They lie about stuff on the logs. So we're going to go to a system that makes it harder to cheat. Not impossible, but harder. Because, if you have your wife in the truck, it's easier to cheat, and she has a CDL. If you're at a company where they're using some foreign ELD provider that with just a phone call would create a phantom driver, it's easier to cheat, right? But the difference between those things is that there's constant monitoring of ELD. I mean, you may not know this, but the FMCSA routinely issues orders that say that a certain ELD provider can no longer be used, and companies have to immediately go to paper logs, and they have like 30 days or something to find another provider. Sometimes they put ELD companies on warning and say, hey, we find that this particular thing you're doing is not correct, so you're going to have to fix it. If they don't fix it, then they lose their license to, or certification to do ELDs. So that's, but here's the thing with the cameras. I don't think that the FMCSA is gonna look at cameras. First of all, cameras are something that we haven't had in the past. It's not like we had some other form of camera, some other form of in-cab visual surveillance. And so I don't really see the FMCSA go in that direction. The other thing that I think would happen, even if they tried, is like what's happening with the speed limiters. You have groups like OIDA that oppose speed limiters, and then you have groups that want speed limiters at ridiculously low speeds. Like there's one group out there, they want it at 60 miles an hour. Well, that's been a big enough concern, and it's a big enough popular issue that some Congress people have gotten involved and have basically said, we're not going to allow speed limiters. We'll defund programs or whatever. There are movements in state legislatures. Like there was an Indiana legislator that said that, because Indiana has a split speed limit. He wants to do away with the split speed limit in Indiana, although his justification is lame. He's like, oh yeah, truckers are just all clogging up the roads and backed up and blah blah blah. And I'm like, dude, that's really not a thing. Like truckers just go as fast as they can or want to go. It's your split speed limit is not the reason there's traffic. The reason there's traffic in Indiana is because it's a crossroads and there's a lot of trucks moving through Indiana. That's just, that's really why it's happening. But either way, you can see with the speed limiters that, legislators are like, no, we're not gonna let that happen. So I think that the cameras would be that kind of an issue. I think Congress would just quash that idea that there's going to be some federal mandate for cameras, because I think there is not a compelling argument that cameras make the roads safer. Like all cameras do is record. They're not prospective, right? They're just reactive. They record when a driver does something unsafe. But it's nice that we have video when a truck driver kills a bunch of people, but that didn't prevent the accident. The idea behind the logs and ELD mandate and making people have logs that are accurate, is to prevent accidents. I don't think you can make an argument that a camera is going to prevent an accident. It does, like I said, it does change driver behavior, but I don't know if that's enough. I just don't know. So I would, if you want to come into trucking, it's not gonna, the industry is very slow to change. I know everybody thinks that technology is moving at this, light speed, but essentially this industry is picking up stuff and dropping stuff off. Everybody talks about how they're a logistics company. They talk about how they got a better way to do it, and that's all bullshit. It's like logistics is the most overused word in the trucking industry, and the other idea that we have the killer app. We're a new trucking company. We have this killer app, and we're gonna do something no one else has ever been able to do. It's like, no, that's just not a thing. That's just marketing, but it's not a reality, right? Because if there was some like super awesome way that was way more efficient and you could charge way less to customers, somebody would have already done it. Like I used to say to people when people would come to me, they're like, yeah, we're starting this new company, here's our idea. And one of the questions I would always ask them is, well, who are your competitors? And I always knew somebody was like not on their game when they would say stuff like, well, we don't have any competitors. I'm like, really? That's what you think, but that's not true. Most there are very few ideas that more than one person hasn't had. The question is who can perfect the idea and get it to market quickest, and who can patent the idea. But it doesn't mean that other people haven't thought of it. That doesn't mean that other people aren't doing this stuff. So anyway, my message is, if you're coming into the trucking industry, it's still okay to do it. It's still okay to do it. You're not, there are going to be hundreds, if not thousands of companies that don't have driver-facing cameras that you can find work at. Walmart, I think, somebody could correct me on this because a lot of people are talking about going to Walmart, but I think Walmart had driver-facing cameras that actually would monitor what was being noise, right? It would get sound, and Walmart had this weird policy at the time where you could only be on your phone like a certain percentage of your drive shift, and then I think there was a backlash and Walmart did away with it. And so I don't think Walmart has driver-facing cameras anymore, and if they do, it's not their entire fleet. Now, somebody could correct me on that, and I'd appreciate it if you put a comment about that. But I think Walmart had some backlash, and they were like, hey, it's not worth the fight. And we really, and the other part of it is Walmart might have been like, look, we had, we didn't get a lot of data from this, or we didn't get a lot of, video from this that made it a compelling thing to continue to have the cameras. So, don't overreact, wait and see what happens. And, I had somebody text me the other day and they said, yeah, they told Dennis Davis straight to his face, the day you put a camera in my truck is the day I leave Prime. And you got to take a stand. You got to take a stand. If that's important to you, you take a stand and you go to plan B or C or D. So anyway, talk to you guys later. Bye.